Have you ever wondered what incredible journey your ancestors took? What ancient empires and forgotten tribes left their mark in your blood? The answers are not lost to time. They're hidden in your DNA. Welcome to DNA Detective, the channel where we solve history's greatest mysteries using the ultimate clue, the human genome. We travel back in time, tracking ancient migrations, debunking national myths, and revealing the shocking connections that prove we are all part of one epic human story. This is where science cracks the codes of the past. Find out what history is written in you. Subscribe, and let's solve the mystery of our roots together. History is written by the victors, but it's also written by the storytellers. And for 2,500 years, one of the greatest storytellers of all time has shaped our understanding of an entire people. His name was Herodotus, the father of history. And in the 5th century BC, he gave us the definitive origin story for the Armenians. He wrote that they were settlers, migrants from the Balkans, a tribe known as the Phrygians, who crossed into Anatolia and carved out a new homeland. For 2.5 millennia, that story has been repeated in history books, taught in universities, and accepted as fact. There's just one problem. It's a lie. Everyone believes Herodotus' story, but the DNA of the Armenian people tells a completely different story. A story that's far older, a far more dramatic, and infinitely more important to human history. Today, we're going to reveal it. We are opening one of history's oldest cold cases. The official story says the Armenians came from Europe, but their blood says otherwise. Who are we going to believe? The ancient historian, or the evidence written in every cell of their bodies? This is not just the story of the Armenian people. This is the story of a genetic ghost, of a living fossil, and a truth that has been waiting thousands of years to be discovered. To crack this case, we first need to understand the official story, the historical alibi. Well, who are the Armenians? They are an ancient people, whose homeland is nestled in a fortress of mountains known as the Armenian Highlands. This is a crossroads of the world, and a rugged land bridge connecting Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Empires have crashed against these mountains for millennia: the Romans, Persians, Byzantines, and Ottomans. The Armenians have endured them all. They are defined by 2 ancient pillars. Watch their language, which is a unique and independent branch of the Indo-European family tree, and their faith. In 301 AD, Armenia became the very first nation on earth to adopt Christianity as its state religion, a fact central to their identity. But where did they come from before that? That's where our mystery begins. The alibi comes from Herodotus. He proposed that the Armenians were not native to the highlands, but were colonists, related to the Phrygians, who had migrated from the Balkans. This idea was supported, for a time, by linguistic theories that saw similarities between the Armenian language and languages of the Balkans, like Greek. For centuries, this was the accepted narrative. A European tribe marching east, settling a new land. It's a clean, simple story. But it's too clean, too simple. Because when geneticists began to analyze the Armenian genome, then they were not just expecting to prove Herodotus right. Then they were expecting to find the footprints of that ancient journey from Europe. They searched for the genetic markers of Balkan peoples. They looked for the echoes of a Phrygian ancestry. They analyzed thousands of samples, using the most advanced technology on Earth. And they found nothing. Absolutely no significant genetic ties between Armenians and the Balkans. The evidence simply was not there. The history books say one thing, but their blood says another. This is the central conflict of our investigation. Herodotus' account is a historical dead end. The DNA evidence does not just question his story, it obliterates it. So, if the Armenians did not come from the Balkans, where on earth did they come from? Our investigation suggests a radical thesis. The Armenians did not come from anywhere. They were already there. They are the direct, biological descendants of the people who have inhabited the Armenian highlands for not just centuries, but for millennia, stretching back into the Stone Age. Their story is not one of migration, but of incredible, almost impossible, continuity. They are a genetic time capsule from the dawn of civilization. Let's follow the evidence. Our first clue lies in the paternal lines, the Y chromosome, passed down from father to son like a sacred inheritance. This is the story of the Armenian fathers. When investigators look at Y DNA, they are hunting for specific haplogroups. Think of them as ancient clans, each with a unique genetic address that tells us where they came from. If the Herodotus theory were true, then we would expect to find Armenian Y DNA dominated by haplogroups common in the Balkans. We do not. Instead, we find a tapestry of lineages that points overwhelmingly to one place, that the Near East and the Caucasus. The first suspect is a haplogroup called J2. It's found in about 22% of Armenian men. This genetic marker is a quintessential signature of the Fertile Crescent. Its story begins over 10,000 years ago, with the very first farmers who domesticated wheat and barley. It spread with the agricultural revolution and traveling into parts of southern Europe, but its heartland and its origin point, it is right here, in the lands surrounding the Armenian highlands. Then there's haplogroup G, found in about 11% of Armenian men. This is another ancient lineage, born right in the Caucasus region. It's a marker of the original inhabitants, a lineage that has been in these mountains since the glaciers retreated at the end of the last ice age. But the most common paternal line in Armenians presents a fascinating puzzle. It's called R1b. About 28% of Armenian men carry this haplogroup. Now, if you know anything about European genetics, you might be thinking, wait a minute, R1b is the most common haplogroup in Western Europe. It's the lineage of the Celts in Ireland and the Basques in Spain. And you'd be right. But here's the kicker. The R1b found in Armenia is a different, much older branch of the family. Think of it this way. The R1b in Europe is like a great-grandson, while the R1b in Armenia is like the great-grandfather. Geneticists believe that this haplogroup actually originated in West Asia, likely in the regions around Armenia and Iran thousands of years ago. One branch of this family, the great-grandson, migrated thousands of miles west, deep into Europe, eventually becoming the dominant lineage there. But the Armenian branch, the great-grandfather, stayed home. It never left. So, when we look at the paternal DNA, we do not see the genetic signature of European migrants. We see the very source code, and we see lineages of the first farmers and the ancient Caucasian hunter-gatherers. Their paternal lines are not just old, they are foundational to the story of Eurasia. The evidence points not to a recent arrival from the West, but to a deep indigenous origin in the East. The story of the fathers is compelling, but it's only half the picture. To get the full story, we need to trace the maternal lines, the mtDNA, passed from mother to child through the generations. This is the story of the Armenian mothers. And if the paternal lines shouted continuity, the maternal lines sing it from the mountaintops. In 2017, scientists did something extraordinary. They sequenced the complete mitochondrial genomes of 52 ancient skeletons from Armenia, with bones spanning an incredible 7,800 years. They had the DNA of women who lived in the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age kingdom of Urartu, and the classical and medieval periods. They then compared this ancient DNA to the mtDNA of modern Armenian women. The result was breathtaking. Modern Armenian women have the least genetic distance to these ancient inhabitants compared to any other neighboring population. In other words, the genetic thread of the mothers has remained virtually unbroken for nearly 8,000 years. Think about that. The woman who lived in a Stone Age settlement on the Armenian plateau 8,000 years ago passed her DNA to her daughter, and who passed it to her daughter, and on, through the rise and fall of Urartu, through the conquests of Rome and Persia, through the adoption of Christianity, all the way to a woman living in Yerevan today. This discovery is monumental. It proves that the female gene pool has been incredibly stable. While cultures shifted, languages evolved, and armies marched, the women of this land remained. They were the bedrock. This tells us that whatever cultural changes happened here, they were not the result of a mass population replacement from somewhere like the Balkans. The changes likely came from the exchange of ideas, or from smaller-scale movements of men, but not a wholesale swapping of the population. But the moose DNA reveals something else, something that ties this story to the whole of Europe. Studies show that Armenians, as a population, have a higher genetic affinity to Neolithic Europeans than most other modern Near Easterners do. Now, this does not mean Armenians came from Europe. It means the exact opposite. It means that a significant portion of Europe's ancestry came from a population very similar to the ancestors of the Armenians. Around 8,000 years ago, farmers from the Near East, carrying Y DNA like J2 and G and mtDNA from these ancient maternal lines, began a great migration into Europe, bringing agriculture with them. Over time, the genetic landscape of the Near East was altered by subsequent migrations and conquests. But in the isolation of the Armenian highlands, that ancient genetic signal, the signal of the first farmers, was preserved in its purest form. Armenians are, in a very real sense, a genetic fossil. They are a living echo of the ancient Near Eastern population that founded agricultural Europe. The mother's DNA proves it. They did not receive DNA from Europe. Their distant relatives gave DNA to Europe. The genetic evidence is overwhelming. But DNA does not exist in a vacuum. It's intertwined with culture, the language, and the archaeological record. If our thesis is right, that Armenians are an ancient, indigenous population, then the cultural clues should support it. And they do, perfectly. Let's start with the kingdom of Urartu. This was a powerful Iron Age civilization that flourished in the Armenian highlands from the 9th to the 6th centuries BC. For a long time, historians debated the relationship between Urartu and the Armenians. Were they the same people? Or did the Armenians arrive after Urartu fell? Recently, geneticists managed to sequence DNA from skeletons found in the ruins of Urartu. The results were conclusive. The ancient DNA from Urartu is closest to modern Armenians. In fact, they are described as indistinguishable. The Urartians were, genetically speaking, the Armenians of the Iron Age. This provides a direct, powerful link between modern Armenians and the ancient people of the highlands, long before any supposed migration from the Balkans could have taken place. But the story gets even stranger, and it centers on a specific historical moment, the late Bronze Age collapse, around 1200 BC. This was a cataclysmic period across the eastern Mediterranean and Near East. Great empires like the Hittites in Anatolia and the Mycenaeans in Greece suddenly and violently collapsed. Trade routes vanished. Cities were abandoned. It was a dark age. Genetic studies have revealed that leading up to this collapse, from about 3000 to 2000 BC, the people of the Armenian highlands were mixing with other Eurasian populations. It was a period of flux and movement. But then, around 1200 BC, at the exact moment the world around them was collapsing, something remarkable happened to the Armenian gene pool. The mixing stopped. The genetic signals of admixture with outside populations ceased. From that point on, for over 3,000 years, the Armenian genome becomes incredibly isolated. It's as if, in the chaos of the collapsing world, the ancestors of the Armenians retreated into their mountain fortress and sealed the genetic gates. This isolation is the key to their unique genetic signature. It's what allowed them to preserve that ancient blend of Neolithic farmer and Caucasian hunter-gatherer DNA without being overwritten by later conquests. It was in this crucible of collapse and isolation that the final, distinct Armenian ethnogenesis likely took place. They adopted a unique culture and identity that separated them from their neighbors, and this cultural isolation led to their genetic isolation. So when Herodotus wrote his story in the 5th century BC, he was looking at a people who had already been genetically stable and isolated in their homeland for 700 years. He may have heard stories or misinterpreted linguistic clues, but the deep history was already written in their blood. A history not of migration, but of hunkering down and surviving. So we come to the verdict of our investigation. Herodotus, the father of history, was wrong. The Armenians are not the descendants of Phrygian migrants from the Balkans. His story, repeated for 2,500 years, has been definitively refuted by the impartial witness of the human genome. The DNA tells us a far grander story. The central thesis of our investigation has been proven. The Armenian people are a testament to one of the most profound examples of human continuity on the planet. They are the direct descendants of a mixture of ancient peoples who settled the Armenian highlands during the Bronze Age, and their genetic makeup has remained remarkably stable ever since the great collapse of civilizations around 1200 BC. They are, without exaggeration, a living link to the ancient Near East. Their DNA preserves the legacy of the world's first farmers, the indigenous hunter-gatherers of the Caucasus, and the great civilizations of the Bronze Age. While empires turned to dust around them, their genetic story, guarded by their mountain home and their resilient culture, remained unbroken. The genetic secret we've uncovered has shaped their entire destiny. This incredible continuity, this sense of being rooted in a single place since time immemorial, helps explain the fierce resilience and the profound connection to their ancestral lands that has defined Armenian identity for thousands of years. They have survived because they have been an island of stability in a sea of historical chaos. In the end, we must ask a final philosophical question. Why does this matter? It matters because history is not just a collection of stories. It is the bedrock of identity. For centuries, the story of the Armenians began with a journey, a migration from another place. But the truth is so much more powerful. Their story begins where they have always been. It is a story of permanence and of deep roots in a landscape that has been theirs since the dawn of modern humanity. DNA is the most honest chronicle we have. It does not care for the tales of historians or the propaganda of empires. It carries the simple, irrefutable truth of who we are and where we come from. For the Armenian people, that truth is now clear. Their history is not written on the pages of Herodotus. It is encoded in their very cells, in a timeless epic of survival and continuity against all odds. It is the story of a people who did not need to find a homeland, because they never, ever left. What's the most surprising fact you've learned about your own ancestry? Let us know in the comments below. And for more investigations into the secrets hidden in our blood, do not forget to subscribe to DNA Detective. Join us as we continue to crack history's greatest codes.